All right, we are live and we are on Facebook and YouTube, just so you know, in case I didn't tell you.
All right,
I'll
nice.
go ahead and read this simple disclosure and then we'll go ahead with our conversation, leaving money to a minor. So here we go. Everything on my computer has been moving extremely slow. There we go. Content in this material is for general information only and not intended to provide advice or recommendations for any individual. This information is also not intended to be a substitute for individualized legal advice. Please consult your legal advisor regarding your specific situation. Guest speakers and Ryan Stark. Something popped up in front of it again. Um, Guest speakers and Ryan Stark are separate entities, and LPL Financial Securities and Advisory Services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA SIPC. Okay, so what I just did was I clicked on I made this disclosure sheet that I always put on the end of my videos. And I clicked on the Photoshop version that I was editing, and I clicked on the picture version, and they both opened at the same time and were blocking each other. So that was fun.
Of course.
Um, Everything's going super well for a live video. But I have here a well-known networker
Plenty.
and awesome professional, super smart attorney, Ricky Adams. And I wanted to kind of give a chance for you to introduce yourself. We'll give everybody some context. Obviously, this is about leaving money to a minor, so we're going to stick around that topic. I know you know a ton about this. So, Ricky, why don't you tell everybody about yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. Thank you, Ryan. It's always good to do these events with you. This is my first Facebook Lives. And I think I did my first podcast with you too, so it kind of is fitting. Um, and I just want to say I like that disclaimer. It was well written by an attorney, probably, right?
Yeah.
It's very
I'm
good.
sure. I'm sure.
Absolutely. So my name is Ricky Adams, as Ryan said. I'm an associate attorney at the law firm of Ober Law in Timonium, Maryland. We focus in estate planning, elder law planning, estate trust and probate administration, and special needs planning. So we kind of do everything in that wheelhouse. The owner of the firm, Mary O'Byrne, has been practicing in that area for over 20 years, and especially in the special needs arena. And Sage Hart is the other attorney there. She's been practicing about 10 years. So it's
Wow.
a nice group of people, very focused and helping people, very rewarding, kind of like the work you do, Ryan. We go to sleep easily because we've helped people protect what they care about.
That's great. And it's always good to have purpose behind it. Obviously, we're always trying to actually help people, even though we're running
Mhm.
businesses. So you feel like you get more out of it. Because I have done transactional sales, being in finance, and it just feels really empty. So I do actually like
Yeah.
helping people, as corny as it sounds, especially like friends and family and people who I know like really appreciate it and will take the
hmm
advice and use it. And I know it'll help them. So that obviously makes me feel good.
hmm
Um, and today we're going to be talking about leaving money to a minor. And I know I have a lot of young friends who are having kids. Obviously, some of you don't, but a lot of people who do have kids, have multiple kids. Maybe they have a basic estate plan. I notice some people put their minor as a beneficiary on accounts, and they just think, at least I'm giving it to my child, and then that'll take care of it from there. But they don't realize the legal ramifications of what comes with it. So I wanted to talk about something that I've gone through of watching something happen and a specific situation where money was left to a minor. And then I wanted to open up your wheelhouse of kind of you giving a story and you also having a chance to talk about how we get out of that mess and how we stop it in the first place.
That sounds good to me.
So I'll start with my story and I'll let you piggyback off of it and help me with an answer of how to get out of it. We had
Okay.
somebody who we were helping the parents who have twins, and money was left from an aunt from life insurance money to them. They were 14 years old. So immediately when they got the money, it was put in an account specifically just in their name. Now, when
hmm
we contact, including the parents, contact the insurance company, they barely give them any information because they're not on it. And they also tell them these are the steps you have to go through before you even start talking to us and have access to this account, which is going through the court system to get
Right.
guardianship.
Right.
I want to just stop right there and open it up. Is this something you've seen often? And what do you do in these situations?
Absolutely. And so it can be very difficult, right? It can be very costly. Like guardianship, any kind of work in the courts, usually you have to hire an attorney to help you through that. Because typically, the court, even if you do it yourself, they can only do so much to help you through that process, right? Usually the clerks will kind of help you fill out forms, but they won't give you any legal advice as far as what would be the best, tactic. It might not be the best option. And that's kind of what you get when you at least talk to an attorney about something like that. And typically, when you think about minors and you think about family law, right? So a lot of family law attorneys, they kind of focus in things like that to help protect things for the benefit of the minor. It's one of those areas where estates and trust and family law kind of come together, I think.
Gotcha.
So as
And
far as
yeah,
what I would do, I
yeah.
mean, now it might be too late to do something other than what they're saying to do, right? I don't
Mhm.
know if you can create another mechanism outside of what they're offering. I've seen some people do like an affidavit of natural guardianship if it was like the other parent, perhaps, and sometimes that may work. But in the case you're saying, it sounds like that's not going to happen because they're not related to them that way, right?
And the thing I wanted to mention too was it being their own parents, and a lot of insurance companies, sometimes you just get people who answer the phone and they read a very specific set of criteria and
Hmm.
they don't indulge in a conversation that has to do with this. They just say, nope, you need guardianship. I know that before you move forward. But I wonder
Right.
if sometimes, and especially I know from talking to insurance companies, they're not always educated in the special circumstances such as this. Do you ever
Hmm.
think there's a time, like you said with the affidavit, when you're just calling somebody and almost leaning on them or explaining to them or educating them of the situation and then they
Hmm.
release the money? Or do you always find it's simply a rule book thing and they just have to go by those rules?
No, so there's definitely a gray area, right? It's always depending on who you're talking to, who's the gatekeeper of the information, and same thing with the bank. So if you have a bank account that's titled a certain way, sometimes the person at the bank will let you do something with it. Sometimes they won't, right? It depends on who it is, how they're applying their own internal rules. And often it may not be what they should be doing according to the law. I mean, I've seen a lot of accounts where it's payable on death, or clearly it should go to this person without a going through the estate, and they always default, oh, I need letters of administration, I need to see the estate papers, and it's like, well, it's not in the estate, like you don't need to see that,
Right.
but
That's the
in their
point of
mind, they're
why
like,
it's titled
I
that
have to
way.
check this
Exactly.
box,
Right.
right? I
Right.
can't think out of this,
Right.
it's like, yeah,
Right.
but it isn't.
Right.
And so you can, like,
Yep.
I've told clients that you could print out the statute, you can like give it to them, and that helps educate them, I think. But I think it always depends on the person, like what day are they having, how open are they to learning something new, right?
Yep. And I've always noticed that gray area too. And I realize I think eventually it just comes down to talking with somebody who's comfortable with that world, such as yourself, where
Mhm.
you can navigate that gray area because it would be nice if they could obviously get things done by not having to go through the expensive couple
Right,
$1,000s of possibly getting a guardianship when it's something that they're literally only doing for that reason.
right.
Is there a reason a guardianship would benefit them in the future that could make them feel better about going through those steps? Or is this just an annoying thing that you think they got to do?
It could be. I mean, guardianship could open up other opportunities, right? So they'd have the authority to interact with other assets, to do other things on behalf of the minors. And so it does have other benefits. But typically, they would also be reporting to the court, right? Whatever they're doing. And so they
Gotcha.
have reporting requirements that they have to manage. And the court, I think it's gotten better with kind of keeping people up to date with those things and expecting those things.
Gotcha. So,
Historically,
yeah.
the court was not so good about that. You would submit a file, a return, or an accounting, and you wouldn't have to substantiate anything. And it's like they're not even really checking to see is the guardian, the person doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Right.
Because really, the court is the guardian. This person is just like their physical, representation, really, of that guardianship. But I think they were just overwhelmed and they couldn't, manage it.
Yeah. And that red tape stuff is always annoying, but it is important because you got to make sure it's the right person. So it
Hmm.
creates an extra job, but I guess it's necessary because people always take advantage of the system, or things will
Hmm.
always fall through the cracks without it.
Right,
Um,
always.
yeah. In our
Uh,
situation too, it's especially from the investment side. Obviously, they want control of the money for the
mhm.
children, just in case they would need it for any reason. But because they can't get it for another 4 years until they're 18, so
Hmm.
they're dealing with a situation also where it's stuck in a fixed account, where I think it's like a 1% or something like that.
Oh,
And they might be looking for, here's something for you because we want to make it grow for college or for our future. It is their money,
mhm.
and they're just thinking, what else can we do with it on behalf of our kids? And
Right.
that's just where we got stuck. So it's like, do they want to eat the cost and then switch, and then go through all these steps? And that's why I wanted to bring it up. in
Hmm.
terms of that. So it sounds like possibly an affidavit. Maybe you just got to go through the court system. Let's
Hmm.
throw it to your side. What's a story that you have, or what's something that you've dealt with that got real messy? And I guess, how do you deal with it?
Sure. So I actually had a case recently that I was kind of talking to you about, where the decedent was a young woman. She was divorced, and apparently the divorce was very messy with the husband, and they have a minor child of the marriage. And of course, when she was alive, they were both, they're both the natural guardians of the daughter. They both had joint legal custody of the daughter. With her death, that would go to the father, of course. She did not have a will. And so she did not designate who she would like to be involved in the daughter's life, or to receive the money for the daughter, which is one of the biggest issues. And so, already the husband is like, "Where's the money?" Like, he wants the money. And she has other family. She has her mother and a father. And so the mother, I'm working with her as the personal representative to kind of safeguard this money for the daughter, because apparently the husband is not good with money, and she doesn't think he would manage it well for the daughter. And depending on how he acts, he represents the daughter's interest really right now until a guardian is appointed, until the court is getting involved. And we're just in the beginning stages of opening the estate right now. But hopefully, once we get to that level, we can identify like a third party to help advocate for her, who is not representing the father's interests, right? Because her interests might be different than his,
Of
and
course.
that's
Yeah.
why there's that conflict isn't there. And I think especially because of the divorce, like in a normal marriage, that you wouldn't have that issue, right? The one spouse dies, of course, the surviving spouse
Right.
would be easily able to take care of that child, and without any problems. But they were divorced, and their legal relationship was kind of severed that way. And so now he wants back in, and then he reached out and said, "Oh, I want to be PR, I want to be co-PR." Like, he wanted to be involved at every step of the way.
Hmm.
And it's going to be interesting because we're going to have to spend basically the daughter's money to protect the money for her, and that's what drives me crazy, because the
Yeah.
money for our expenses come out of the money that's in the estate, which is supposed to be for her. You
Right.
know.
I remember you saying that in these situations, who wins are the attorneys, because the money
Mhm.
comes out and that's all who gets it when you're arguing back and forth over things
Right.
like this. I guess
Exactly.
that's the unfortunate side of the planning
Hmm.
and the emotions of everything that go through a divorce. I've never I think I've only actually dealt with watching one, and for us it was pretty simple of just splitting a joint account. I think it wasn't much
Hmm.
more than that. So I'm sure your side is, you would see mediating something like that, maybe a lot more of
Right.
complete split of assets, of moving and houses and titling and things like that.
Hmm.
But I can imagine that gets really emotional and that's difficult to deal with.
Oh, definitely. And I
Yeah.
think especially because, if each side gets an attorney, you're paying their fees potentially, they're going to want to get paid, right? And certainly they're allowed legal representation because there may be tactics or strategies that they can't think of. And so that's the other side of it. What's fair? The daughter, is supposed to be able to show her, what her interests are and to protect them. So it's an interesting balance, I think. And my view is to always be like collaborative, because again, we want to protect the money for her. And I even had to counsel the mom about that because she was like, "Oh, this guy's a bastard, and I don't
Right.
want to do this." I'm like, "Well, but he is the father, and
Right. Right.
we have to, he's going to be involved because he represents her, and you have to be like reasonable, in my view.
Right.
This money is for her,
Right. It's
and
unfortunate you
if
split, but you're still a team because there's a child involved.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
And really,
Right.
the daughter is the only heir of the estate, so all the money is for her. But that, it could be several $100,000, and she's 9 years old. So how,
Right.
what's a 9-year-old going to do with all that money, right? That's the other idea. Even when she turns 18, that's a lot of money.
Right.
And so
Exactly.
there should be a way, and the court, will allow you to build in mechanisms to protect it for that.
Yeah.
Now to fix that, the best thing to be would be to create something in your will, create a trust. And that's what we typically do at our office, is create what we call like a minor's trust, basically. And then you can kind of decide, when they would get distributions, what they can spend the money on. And that way you kind of have that control and protection. And it also protects it from the creditors, you know.
Yep.
So there's all sorts of benefits for that.
And that's exactly the next place I was going to go in terms of watching this money stuck at the insurance company. The next step is, where do you put it from there? Because now you
Mhm.
have access to money that the parents have, but you're still giving. And in our case, it was $100,000 a piece. So
That's a lot.
that's, it's only growing incrementally. So let's just call it 100 when they're 18. That's still a ton of money.
Yeah.
And the first thing you can put it all is all in a house in a bad area, or
Mhm.
you get into a rental property with a friend, and not to say all these things are terrible, but if you want to control beyond that, that would be the way to go. So when you're
Mhm.
doing this minors trust, what does something like that look at, and how much control do you have over it, in terms of when they get it, how much it is, how it's managed, and how are the parents involved versus like the third parties you use?
So usually at that point, the parents are both dead, right? Because typically, in our planning, when one parent dies, the surviving parent would get all the assets, right? And so the minors trust wouldn't actually exist until both of them pass away. And
Okay.
so in the document, you also appoint, guardians for your children, and also trustees of the trust. And sometimes you might want them to be different people, right? Because the guardian of the person is who's going to take care of the child. They're going to live with them typically wherever they are. And so that may be a consideration if they're in the same state, or they're going to have to leave all their friends and go to New York. You have to think about that, and always check with them to make sure that they're okay, taking your children. Always say, make sure that you've talked to these people. Don't just put them in the document and say, it'll never happen. And then when it does, they're like, wait, I can't take another kid. I already have 3 kids.
I was gonna say,
So it's
what I'm sure that happens. What
yeah.
happens in that case when somebody does that? Are you allowed to like deny the
No, yeah, of
children?
course.
And I guess you would, right? Because
Yep,
you
yep.
didn't have any. Yeah. Okay.
And then the only problem is the person they've named then isn't going to do it. And so that's unfortunate. Hopefully they've built in backups. We always try to build in at least 1 or 2 backups for the guardian and the trustee for that purpose. And again, that way it's supposed to like represent them, right? That's the idea. But one of the benefits of having the trustee and the guardian be different people is that they get to check each other, right? So the guardian can come to the trustee and say, "Hey, I want to take the family on a vacation," and the trustee can like kind of say, "Okay, well, is this appropriate? Like, is this what the parents would have wanted? Is this what we should be spending the money on? Why is she paying for everybody? And this you know this
Right.
made up child. Why should she be paying for all this when
Right. Right.
we're
Right.
taking like 10 people?
Right. Right.
And it's also another advocate for the child as they're growing up, right? So they're in their lives, they kind of control the purse strings, and that can be very valuable for them.
I agree. That's a really good point too, of having them be different. And we talk about this a lot in finance, and we have the hard conversations, which is you really need to think about whether you want to use family or not, of
Hmm.
deciding who you can trust to hold on to the money and really do what the trustee says, or do
Hmm.
what the paperwork says, do what the trust says. And I know
Right.
there's rules to catch them, but there's always ways people can mishandle things. So you really
Oh
want
yeah.
somebody honest. What's your advice on either using a family member or using a third party?
Well, so I think the family member can be helpful because obviously they may know the person's interests. They'll know exactly what mom and dad would have always wanted for them, but it also is right. So if you're going back to your brother for the money, your relationship may only be about money then, right? Because he controls your money. And that's
Right.
kind of unfortunate for the brother to put him in that position. And a lot of siblings don't like that, you know. Is that fair? And maybe instead they could be a trust protector, to work, and advocate on behalf of the beneficiary in a different way, who could check the trustee, and that way, they can still be part of the planning, but not the good or bad person, depending on whether they say yes or no. Because it could be maybe the family could be, they could try to say, look, I need the money, and they could convince them to give it to them. Whereas a third party, maybe they couldn't as easily convince them to do that.
Yeah.
You
I
know.
think with these things, it's always getting into having a ton of communication and being on the same page, especially when you're advocating for a child and figuring out
Hmm.
what they need. It's not always easy, but it is important. And that's why I push people to do estate planning. And I specifically talked to people who said, I don't even like to think about, my own death. And I said,
Right.
well, if you have children, think about what they're going to do. If you have a
Hmm.
4-year-old, they're not going to be able to be your executor. They're not going to be able to handle your
Right.
stuff. And you want to make sure they end up in the right place, with a life set up for them too. And it's not fun to think about, but I do think it is important.
Hmm.
So, especially leaving money to a minor, updating your estate plans are important for that. And I think we touched on like what could happen in terms of that. Do you have any other situations besides like a divorce that people commonly get into that you would say be careful?
I would say definitely anyone with special needs planning, which of course, your team would certainly understand that. You
Hmm.
want to make sure that, those things are put in place ahead of time, that you have the letter of intent prepared, that you've kind of designated where you want those assets to go, so you don't implicate those benefits that that person might be on. It could be expensive, it could be time consuming, but it's well worth it to
Hmm.
protect it for that person. That's very important.
It is, and it's something that I've indulged in a little bit more and have done more special needs planning as much. I've been trying to talk about it a little bit more because I try to give people information that I think they don't have. It's just not. It's
Mhm.
just not. People just don't talk about it very much. And I
Yeah.
realize if they don't have the resources to help them, they're in a hard spot that makes it even worse. So I try to give all the information I can, and I think special needs planning is especially a very careful area where you're really put in a situation to make sure you're planning correctly and you're writing those letters of how the child is specifically,
Hmm.
with my experience of working with people and families who have children who may have autism or something that's
Hmm.
very specific, maybe have a very specific bedroom routine. It's like something
Hmm.
like that. That's where I think a guardian who is very personable and knows them very well comes in handy. And then maybe you have that third party who's handling the money, or you have
Right.
the other sibling who's really good with money, has been
Right.
careful their whole life,
Like use
something
them
like
for their
that,
skills.
where you're working
Right.
together and making sure that you're taken care of. So I'm a
Hmm.
big advocate of that too, of making sure you're doing what you're good at. And I
Hmm.
always say be very, very careful about leaving money to your minor as a beneficiary, whether it's a
Hmm.
401k. I notice people usually will put their wife or put their spouse, husband or wife, and then they'll put their child underneath as a
Hmm.
contingent.
Yeah, I see
Because
that all the
they
time.
think it's
Yeah.
probably not going to happen, but if it does, at least it ends up there. But that's not the way to do it. And
Right.
it doesn't mean you need to go spend a couple $1,000 on a trust. But if you want them to have the money appropriately, it may. So unfortunately, things cost money, and I tell people
Hmm.
that I know you don't want to pay another big ticket. I know you may feel sticker shock, but the control that you get and the things that you're allowed to do, like with this tool, may solve your problem. So at
Right.
least look into it, and that's why I give people the option. Um,
Hmm.
I think estate planning is extremely important. I even push people to estate planning just as fast as I push them to do investments and things like that with me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. And I think a lot of people, like you said, they don't like to be faced with their own mortality, right? They don't want to look at what they have to do. They don't want to visit that. Usually I've seen it takes like a trigger, right? Like a new
Yep.
child or a death in the family or someone suddenly sick. And they're like,
Yep.
oh, I guess I should do that,
Yeah. Yep.
And, and sometimes it's too late. Like in the case I explained, like the decedent was young. I'm sure she intended to do something eventually and she just never got around to it.
Right.
Once it's too late, unfortunately.
Yep. I agree. And I think, yeah, like not wanting to think about it, not wanting to plan. I always notice that too, where people come in. I always called it the fire. It seems like people are on fire, then
Right,
they'll come in. But it's kind of like the doctor telling you you're sick and you should work out more, where you could have started
right.
working out and hopefully you don't end up getting sick. So I always like to tell people to get in, at least look at these things. I have a lot of friends who are in their 30s too and have kids that I really push to estate planning.
Hmm.
I know people who they have beyond investments, they have rental properties and things like that, and they don't have estate plans. And that thing
Hmm.
is going to be a mess for things because they've been handling it their whole lives. They've been the ones that doing it. The people who have the money understand the money, but
Right,
if you don't pass it down correctly, the person who hasn't been touching it has no idea what's going on. So I've
right.
seen it's so messy, and I'm sure you've seen that too with people trying to grab stuff. So I know
Oh
people don't
yeah.
like to think about estate planning, don't like to think about dying, but it's the most annoying thing. Beyond you being gone, the problems are gone for you, and they start for
Right.
everybody else.
When a
So
lot of people say they're like, "Oh, it won't be my problem," I'm like, "Well, that's a little selfish.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
it's going to be the problem for your loved ones, you
right,
know." I mean,
right.
I think another idea, and you probably come up with this a lot too, like how do you kind of like put a layout of their assets for the next person to know? And so we usually recommend keep like a little book of like your information or your passwords and whatnot, and maybe revisit it like around tax season or do it annually because things change. You
Hmm.
might have opened a new account and forgot about it, or you might want to change a beneficiary. And so
Hmm.
we give our clients like a little sheet that at the end of our representation for estate plan that kind of like gives them some guidance on that. And most clients will usually ask me about that at the end, like, well, what do I do now that I have all this? Like, how does the next person find it?
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have any
Yeah.
ideas about that.
No, I believe in that too. Having a binder, a folder, something. It really should probably be on the computer or somewhere where
Mhm.
everybody knows. I just really advocate opening up communication to at least where people can start looking and understanding where things are, so they have an idea. I think the older generation, like one above us and even one more, they grew up in a time where they just didn't talk about money.
Right.
And I
It was all
think that's when we
private.
ran into these problems, because they were like, I don't want you to know how much we have, how much you're getting.
Right.
And while I tell people you don't have to deliver account titles, at least tell people where they are or how it's going to travel, or at least where to go to figure all that stuff out.
Right.
Things are always attached to a phone number. So at least you have a 1-800 number. Here's this
Mhm.
statement. Let me call this person. Oh, this
Right.
account's gone. Put it to the side. Oh, this has money. Then you can get it. At least you have some way of organizing that death that's happening. And usually
Mhm.
what's so difficult is people are grieving at the same time.
Right. And it's like
And
actually triggering that as they're
yeah,
going
yeah,
through it.
and it's
Yeah.
hard to do those things, and to search. And I've heard of people looking through attics, looking under couch cushions,
Mhm.
finding
Oh
money,
yeah.
money
And
in weird
books.
places you'd never
Right. In the
think.
freezer.
So I understand that kind of stuff, but I really advocate parents talking to children about money, not only because I think it
Mhm.
advocates financial literacy and competency, and it gets kids growing up in the real world kind of quicker about
Mhm.
how they have to think about money, but also it just stops that annoying issue of
Right.
the estate plan blowing up and people have no idea where things are.
Because it's like a scavenger hunt then, and you have to like try
Absolutely.
to find it. And I think you're right. It almost is like a stigma, like you know, oh, I can't tell you what we have. And it should be like you should like educate them with it, like you said, like
Yeah.
it's about literacy. That's a good idea. It could
And
be
then
another
there, yeah,
tool.
you can still make them save and have your own techniques, and everybody has their own parenting style. I just believe in, like I said, if you're somebody who's very serious about not telling them how much they're getting, a lot of parents have
Mhm.
more money than the kids know, and they don't want them
Right.
to know because they want
And
them
that's
to work
fine.
and things like that. I get
Right.
that, but I'm just advocating, and at least teach them to invest them, show them what you did, or tell them how to do that, and then tell them, hey, here's this box. Should we
Hmm.
die? I know this is morbid, but here's this box you
Right.
go to. This is our death box, or whatever it is.
Right.
You
There
could
you
probably
go.
make it something more
Might have
fun
to
than
think of
that.
a
Like,
different name for
yeah,
that, right?
just a
What
big
about like a
skull
life
on it with
box?
X's. You're just 9 years old. No, we'd
This
probably
is
think
our
of
life
something more gentle.
box.
Not, yeah, no, I like that life
I like
box.
that.
Um, that's so much better. So much better. Um,
We'll have to trademark
so
that, Ryan. That's our next
exactly,
idea.
that's exactly. You're on it. We're doing it. I love like the techniques to use, and the things I want to recap a little bit to remind people is there's always a gray area. Just because somebody tells you something doesn't mean it can't get done. Of course, you always want to
Mhm.
follow the rules, but it's important to talk to professionals because they can help you go through that gray area. There usually
Mhm.
is one. Sometimes there's that steel door that's closed that you can only get through by doing what they say, and you got to follow the steps. So that is the case, but at least know that there's a place to possibly navigate. Be careful leaving money to a minor, especially with special needs children, because they're getting government benefits. You can knock them off government benefits and they
Mhm.
have to get back on. It's just another couple annoying steps that happen. So,
Mhm.
as you're planning for yourself, and I really think planning for your estate planning helps you get everything in order. It helps you put everything in front of you, and it helps you plan for yourself. It's another
Right.
reason I like people doing it. It organizes your own life to make
Mhm.
sure that you're passing it on neatly to somebody else, and it gets your own process moving. So
Right,
make
because a lot of
sure.
things you could forget. You might have a life insurance policy from your prior employer or
Yes,
something to roll over from a prior employer that named like an old, girlfriend or boyfriend. That's happened before. And that's why
exactly.
it's like you have to, like you said, you have to kind of keep track of your own stuff
Yeah.
for your own use.
So with things
You
that
know.
you see all the time, I guess what's the one biggest tip you would tell people? And it sounds like one of them would probably be reviewing documents.
Mhm.
What's something else I guess you would say to make sure that people are watching out for things like that? Because I think these issues are best not to get into in the first place.
Right.
So how do we make sure, I guess, we're taking care of and planning properly?
I would say don't let your fear of, death or mortality stop you from getting a plan together. And I think also, remember that this is your plan, right? These assets are for you, your use. What's going to go to your heirs and the beneficiaries is after you're done with it. Like that's something else people I think kind of forget. Like, oh, I want to give my kids all my money. And we're like, well, you might need that money, like for yourself, for your own care, for your next lifestyle. Like that's something else I think that is kind of misused a lot. It's like it should be for you.
Yeah.
You want to make sure you have enough money to live the life that you want to live, and
Yeah.
what the kids will get will be whatever is left.
I,
You
I've
know,
I've had that difficult conversation too, where somebody wants to give everything, and I'm like, after we've done planning, they're like, so what are we going to give our children? I said, basically, like you said, in a professional way, whatever you have left, because
Right.
this is what you need,
Right.
and it may be all of it. So
Right.
it's just
Especially with
something to
long-term
think about.
care.
But exactly. You never
Yeah.
know where things are going to hit. So that's why you revisit the plan. That's why you keep adjusting. That's why you look at your finances. That's annoying. I know it's annoying. That's why you look at your budget, even though it's annoying. You may do that a little bit more, but then annually you're looking at these estate planning documents. When you read, oh yeah, I forgot this person leaving to this, and changing, making sure everything's in order.
Or you might have like a new niece or nephew.
Exactly.
That happens a
so
lot.
much,
Like,
I see that.
them.
Absolutely. And you add a person and you adjust the percentages, and maybe that changes how you give money to charities or things. It all gets kind of a domino effect when things change. That's why we're always looking at it. We've been running for about a half hour, and I think gave a lot of people good answers. I'd love to do this again. I really like staying on these important topics that I don't think are talked about enough, because people don't really see the issue, because I feel like they die and then it's in front of you. And it's kind of like when you see somebody go through a nursing home, I notice people start planning for nursing homes in that case.
That's the trigger I'd mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. So that trigger needs to, I think the trigger should just be you planning with the sense that you never have to use it for any reason is the best thing ever. It's just like insurance.
Right.
It's just, it's like any other situation. It sucks to pay for something, but it's peace of mind. And I think peace of mind goes a long way. I think people don't know how relieved they can be until they're relieved. So, so I really push that aspect of at least look into it. And thanks so much, Ricky, for being here.
And my pleasure, Ryan. Thank you for having me.
If people want to get a hold of you or contact you, feel free to comment in the bottom. You can post all your stuff there.
Oh,
but
sure.
also, why don't you go ahead and let everybody know whether you want to give them a phone number or a website, or if they can just reach you on Facebook.
So you can always call me at our office number is 410-667-0020. And my email address is richard@oburnlawoffice.com. And our website is oburnlawoffice.com. That's easy.
Yeah.
But we're always happy to, to be a resource. Even if we don't handle that type of matter, we can always find someone who can at least consult with the client and assist them. Always happy to help.
Perfect. And I also tagged Ricky. I don't know where this is. Up, I guess.
I think it's up, right?
I think it's up, right? Facebook, LinkedIn, doesn't matter. So Facebook is up. I tagged Ricky, so you go ahead and click on his page and contact him there as well. And obviously just send him a note. And great stuff, Ryan and Ricky. Thanks for doing this. Hey, you're welcome. Thanks for making a comment. That was the first comment I seen. I didn't even know people could comment until that happened. So I really appreciate you doing that. I completely forgot. So, hey, we're live. No, but thank you so much. I definitely want to do this again, and we'll pick another hot topic. We've been talking about people who pass, like famous people, time and time again, pass away without doing estate plans. And it's really just about waiting for the next multimillionaire to do it. And then maybe we can talk about that. It seems to happen.
Not to be morbid, right?
Not to be morbid, but it's so much. And it's why I like to talk about it and push those kinds of things, because it's like, look at people with all the money in the world. They're still not focusing like on that issue at hand.
Right.
And I think it's important that we're realizing that money isn't necessarily the issue. It can sometimes be psychological to get through. So thanks again, Ricky.
Other barriers.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. So if you have those barriers or something, don't be afraid to talk to Ricky and talk about them and kind of get through that. Just because you pick up the phone doesn't mean you're writing a check. Just make sure you get started in some way. That's the way I like to say it to people, because don't be scared, or you'll never do anything and you'll never plan. And then you'll blink and you'll be 50 and you'll be like, I should have done this at 30. That's how it always goes. So thank you so much. And I look forward to talking to you again. I will see you around very soon.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend.
I will, definitely. I'm actually about to go back outside now, wait for my daughter to wake up. I've actually been hearing her cry for like the past 30 minutes. So maybe I'll try to cook. Maybe
a nap will happen later. Right?
We'll see. Yeah, we'll see.
Thank you, my friend. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks, Ricky. Hey, I hope your last live. I hope your first live was awesome. Appreciate you being here.
Yeah, it was a great experience. Thank you. You make it easy, Ryan. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Appreciate it. You're great to talk to, as always. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Thank you, Ryan. Bye-bye.
Bye.